I would love, and once again, something I heard you discuss on a different podcast. Because for us, the words hypertrophy, power, like those are something we've been speaking for, as you decades, just on a smaller scale. But for the listener, can you kind of touch on that, and then also segue into something that the thing I heard you say on the other podcast was that I think we at some point we start to lose 1% of our muscle mass a year, but then I love that you described, well, it's actually a 3x multiplier on strength and then another 3x multiplier on speed or power. And I thought that was really fascinating because I think there's so much focus on the muscle component that's being talked about, how important lifting is, lifting into your later years. But I think for anyone that's even self-reflective or a formal athlete, I know when it comes to power or speed, you don't do that for 2 or 3 years and you go to do one of those workouts and you're like, holy shit, I can't even get close to the output of what I used to do. And if I do, I tweak something. So I would love for you to talk about, like, yeah, start with just kind of the difference between those systems, but then also get into the speed side of things. Cause that's something I don't hear talked about often, but I know if you're honest with yourself and you kind of hold yourself to the fire of testing new programs, you realize just how important it is to maintain that system.
And linear speed, like I don't even want to know what my 40 would be right now. I really don't. You know what I mean? Like I still think
You could still crack 5.
well above average
Yeah.
of the normal human, but compared to like playing football in college and, you're always working that speed, that explosive power, man. So that's yeah. I mean, I always wonder, should I be going back out to the football field and hitting 100s and 40s and you know what I mean? And 10-yard starts out of the block. But yeah, I'd love you to hit on all of that. I think I know the answer and we're going to need to get our asses back out there, but go ahead.
Yeah, you do. You do, for sure. I can't make a really strong scientific argument that one's 40-yard dash speed will predict how long and well you live, but I can make a kind of close argument to that. If you look at the reason I answered the question the way I did with the different nodes, if you look at research, if you want to take it that way, what's the research on longevity? What's the research on mortality risk? What's the research on wellness span? Okay, fine. If you want to just zoom all the way back and say, I don't need research. What does a basic human have to be resilient, to be able to function in multiple domains? You want to be able to survive and do lots of different things. There's the old concept of arete, A-R-E-T-E, right? Which is to say, like, I should be able to write poetry and hunt a deer and also be a listening, thoughtful philosopher. Like I should have all these skill sets at some level. I don't have to be a world champion or anything, but I should have well-roundedness. The reason they appreciated that or people ask for that is because now you can handle basically anything at a surface level. As you all know, the vast majority of survivalists, whether that means like surviving a business conversation or surviving a parenting situation, just means don't be a white belt. If you can be a blue belt in as many things as possible, that's the biggest leap you're going to have. You don't need to be a purple or brown or black belt. Like these are jiu-jitsu, if you're unfamiliar with things, right? But just don't be a white belt, which is the difference between killing your first deer and never killing one is enormous in terms of survival, right? The difference between can you change a tire on your car or not is these are big, 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 big things that are going to keep you kind of there. Do you basically know what to do in a physical altercation? Again, blue belt level. The same thing with your physical attributes. Can you walk 5 miles? Can you walk 10 miles maybe? Not fast, but can you physically get it done if you had to walk 10 miles, your car broke down, who knows what happens, right? Do you have some basic physical strength? Do you have some mobility? Can you handle getting your heart rate up and coming back down and not passing out, having a panic attack, freaking, all those things? Those columns will be the same. If you start looking at that, what are the most significant predictors of longevity? Oh, your VO2 max, your baseline physical activity. People that are physically active, doesn't matter if you're doing structured exercise or not, the step count, right? Great, the VO2 max, that's your high heart rate thing. People that have a sufficient amount of muscle. You don't have to have enormous amounts of muscle, but you can't be under muscle. There is a very linear reduction in mortality risk as you go from under muscle and slightly increase up until you get to sufficient level. This is the same analogy. Get to blue belt. I want to see you at brown belt, but don't go white belt. The difference in risk is going to cut in half going from white belt to blue belt. That's the big, you'll see the same thing with VO2 max. Your mortality or survival risk, however you want to chop that up, will literally be cut in half as you go from the bottom. I'll back up. If you look at jiu-jitsu, you have white belt, which is everybody's white belt, right? That's where you start. And then you have blue, brown, or blue, sorry, blue, purple, brown, black. There's 5. That means bottom 20th percentile, next 20th percentile, next 20th, 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 highest percentile. That's how research works too. We take everybody, bring them up into the 20th percentiles. So the analogy actually literally works perfectly. If you're in the bottom 20th percentile of VO2 max, right, you're talking 4, 5, 6x risk of death. If you go from bottom 20th percentile, which is white belt, to next bottom 20th percentile, which is blue belt, you're talking about a 50% reduction in death, right? You'll see the same thing for muscle size, basically. The numbers aren't exact, but it's basically the same idea. You see the same thing for muscle strength, grip strength, leg strength. You see the same thing for foot speed, reaction time, balance. Massive, massive reductions in death. And it doesn't go, by the way, do the math. You have a 50% reduction going from blue belt or white belt to blue belt. There's not a 50% reduction going from blue belt to purple belt. It's now a 20%. So it's a big chunk and it helps. But the biggest gains you get by far are going from white to blue. So just have very basic skills in as many physical attributes as you possibly can. Physical activity, VO2 max, leg strength, grip strength, balance, foot speed. And these are the ones that you sort of brought up at the end that people don't talk about. Power is the same thing. You have to have foot speed. You have to have hand speed. You have to be able to move your body. Again, I don't need you to necessarily going from brown to black belt in your 40-yard dash is not going to do anything to your longevity for the most part. In fact, probably could argue going from purple to brown won't do much. But if you're in that bottom categories, then you really are going to significantly increase your quality of life in the short and long term. I can give you examples of why that's happening, both practical as well as physiological. That is the honest reality. So when you hear me break that program down before, that's why I put all those components in it. And when you hear me break that down on the other podcast you're referring to, that's why I'm doing it, right? So whether you're talking about me training one of our professional golfers, whether you're talking about working with one of our NFL players, or any of the number of non-athlete clients that I coach, scientific, I can make this argument whatever frame lens you want me to frame it on, but the answer is still the same. This is just being an artist. This is being a well-rounded human being from your physical skill set to get you in the best position possible in the short and long term. So I'm not sure I answered your actual question there, but that is really the framework of why I put it together. So I think you were asking about going more specific into speed and power, but that's the reality. We know that you will lose speed at a much more accelerated rate as you age. Your VO2 max and your muscle size will decline somewhat, but more and more research is indicating that those things are not necessarily guaranteed. You see the same thing with HRV, by the way. That's a measure of kind of autonomic nervous system. That's not a guaranteed drop with age. It will go down slightly, but the kind of average numbers that you spewed out, 10% per decade, are highly modifiable. Highly, highly, highly modifiable. Speed is going to go faster. You will see this and look at the Olympics. You will see people doing well in strength-based sports. Powerlifting can be okay. Certainly can play in the NFL. But the 100-yard dash, you're not going to see a 44-year-old there. You will not see a 37-year-old for the most part, right? It's really, really, really hard to maintain speed. It is one of the first physiological things that goes. You mentioned the numbers earlier, but it's going to go at triple the rate muscle strength will than muscle size, and then triple the rate again for muscle speed. So if you don't actively make sure that you're holding on to those components, they get harder to maintain as you age. And so we want to make sure we emphasize those, but they don't take a tremendous amount to dose. A little bit of something here and again is actually quite adequate enough to maintain most physical attributes, and speed is not that different. Speed is the thing that will go the fastest in the shortest term. Anyone, take a golfer, a tennis player, a football player, if you don't let them go fast for 2 or 3 weeks, you'll notice changes in club head speed. You'll notice small changes in a couple of weeks. Nothing will happen to muscle size in 2 weeks, for the most part, as long as you're basically physically active. Strength is a part. A part of strength is speed. So that will start to leak down for the same reasons. But speed is the one thing that toggles up and down the fastest, both in the short and long term. And so it's something that you need to make sure is in your plan at least once a week if you can. But that's effectively what we're looking at in terms of speed. So again, I'm not sure I answered your exact question, but I just started going there.
No, you got it.
Well, it's a cool analogy just for anything in life. Like you said, this is not just strength and conditioning and things like that. You know, try to adopt basic skills on a variety of different disciplines. And that marginal increase to that next tier, you know, that blue belt that you referred to is your biggest lift. You know what I mean? And your highest ROI kind of effort, right? And so I think that's just a great, I mean, that you can apply that to so many things in your life. That's pretty awesome. I'm going to steal that one.